We used to say Canada depended on the US for cars, for lumber, for energy, but today the script is flipping. A silent shift is underway, one that started with a tariff and now is ending with an entire trade realignment. In this video, we'll explore how one of the US tariff policies accelerated Canada's integration with Europe and Asia and rewrote decades of trade strategy. Whether this was the intention of the US policymakers or not is another debate, but the fact is things are indeed shifting. We'll look at how Canada quietly repositioned itself through strategic trade agreements, what that means for US consumers, and why some policy changes can be undone, only outpaced. But before we get into it, here's a question for you. Since the US imposed a 35% tariff, how much more does the average American household now pay annually due to higher import prices? Roughly, of course, these are just estimations. Drop your guess in the comments and stick around, we'll circle back to this in the end. When the US slapped a 35% tariff on a whole bunch of Canadian goods, it looked like your typical protectionist playbook, right? Make imports expensive, protect your domestic industries, flex a little economic muscle. But here's the thing about trade. It's not a light switch you can just flip off and on. It's more like this massive interconnected web. Pull one thread and suddenly other threads start snapping into place to fill the gap. Canada didn't panic. It hardly ever does. They didn't throw a diplomatic tantrum or start a tit-for-tat tariff battle. Instead, they did something much smarter. They pivoted. Rather than escalate with their own countermeasures, Canada just quietly started looking elsewhere for business. And the results are pretty incredible, actually. In just 18 months, exports to the EU jumped a massive 26%. We're talking 34 billion. Exports to the UK climbed 16%, and if you look across the Pacific, trade with Japan, Singapore, and Australia really started picking up steam under the CPTPP framework. Fun fact, the CPTPP framework is literally the very same agreement that the US helped design and then just walked away from. This wasn't a trade war playing out in the headlines, this was more like a quiet divorce. Canada simply started building relationships elsewhere while the US wasn't really paying attention. So now Canada is sitting pretty with one of the most globally diversified trade setups in the Western world. I mean, we're talking serious geographic spread here. They've got 3 major agreements that basically give them a VIP pass to over 1.2 billion consumers. There's the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yeah, that is a mouthful. Everyone just calls it CPTPP, which is not really any less of a mouthful. But it plugs Canada directly into some of the hottest Pacific economies like Vietnam, Japan, and Australia. Then you've got CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, no less of a mouthful, which basically gives them a direct line into the entire EU market. And then you've even got a dedicated bilateral deal that ties them closely to post-Brexit Britain. Talk about good timing on that one. Meanwhile, the US, still the biggest economy in the world, don't get me wrong, is mostly stuck playing the bilateral game of working with regional deals like the revamped NAFTA. But here's what makes this super interesting. This isn't just about spreading your bets around. It's actually leverage. Canada can literally reroute products, repackage deals, and resell to different markets depending on what's happening politically or economically. They're essentially immune. They're operating across time zones, regulatory zones, and power zones all at once. That's some serious flexibility right there. Let's circle back to that 35% tariff for just a second. On paper, it was supposed to protect US industries from foreign competition, right? Keep those Canadian goods out, give American companies some breathing room. But in practice, it basically just made everything more expensive for regular Americans. Think tanks like Yale Budget Lab estimate that tariffs are costing the average US household between $1,600 and $2,000 per year, depending on how the trade retaliation plays out. That's not speculation, it's real money in your actual pocket. And get this, it's not because Canadian producers decided to jack up their prices, it's because the whole import system got twisted around. Canadian producers didn't actually lose business, they just found new customers. It's almost like a game of musical chairs. For every US buyer they lost, boom, there is a European buyer, or a British buyer, or someone in Asia ready to step in. And in the meantime, US consumers, they're still buying Canadian goods half the time. They're just paying way more for them because now they're getting routed through third markets first. This is what economists love to call a boomerang effect. You throw that tariff thinking you're going to hit the exporters, but it just comes flying back and smacks your own consumer in the wallet instead. While the US was negotiating NAFTA and pulling out of multilateral deals, Canada was building. It joined trade blocs, signed memoranda, harmonized standards. Because trade infrastructure isn't just ships and pipelines, it's also legal architecture. Its dispute resolution frameworks unify standards for food safety, digital privacy laws, and arbitration procedures. When that scaffolding is in place, countries can redirect trade flows fast. No lawyers, no new tariffs, no multi-year negotiations, just plug in and go. This is why Canada could pivot while the US is still recalculating. By the way, if you want to support this kind of analysis, there's a Ko-fi link below. Every contribution helps, as these videos do take a while to make. You know, ironically, the crown jewel of Canada's whole pivot, the CPTPP, was originally America's baby. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was literally dreamed up under Obama as this big strategy to keep China's growing economic influence in check. Classic American move, right? Build a club, invite your friends, keep your competitors out. But then 2017 rolls around and the US just walked away. Meanwhile, Canada, Japan, and the rest of the gang were like, well, this is still a pretty good idea, right? So they stayed put, gave it a rebrand, tweaked the framework a bit, and got it ratified without the original architect. Fast forward to today, and that agreement gives Canada direct access to 500 million consumers. They can trade freely with countries where the US still has to negotiate deal by deal, meeting by meeting. In a sense, the US didn't just walk away from the table, they basically handed the keys over to someone else. Then, of course, there's the CETA, that's the Canada-EU deal. And this isn't just your basic let's cut tariffs on lumber and maple syrup kind of agreement. We're talking services, digital rights, investment protections, public procurement, the whole 9 yards. 99% of tariffs between Canada and the EU, gone. And the results speak for themselves. EU exports to Canada have jumped 46%. 44% more European small and medium businesses are now doing business with Canada. Sectors like pharmaceuticals, fintech, and green tech are getting so intertwined, it's actually hard to tell where one economy ends and the other one begins. This isn't just your surface-level trade relationship. This is deep integration, the kind of comprehensive system the US used to run with NAFTA, except now the US isn't even in the room where it happens. And let's talk about the UK for a second. Brexit broke a lot of things, right? But it also opened quite a few doors. When the UK decided to leave the EU, they suddenly found themselves needing fresh trade relationships pretty badly. And Canada literally stepped right in. First, it was just a basic rollover agreement to keep things moving, but then the UK officially joined the CPTPP in 2023, and that's when things really clicked. Now Canada is basically acting as this transatlantic bridge, connecting Britain to all those Pacific markets they may not have easy access to otherwise. Imports from Canada to the UK have absolutely surged. Canada is now Britain's 16th largest trading partner, and they've climbed several spots in just 3 years. This isn't just lucky timing, it is literally smart positioning. Canada saw a vacuum, geographically, legally, economically, and they just filled it. Let's talk for a second about the permanence or impermanence of these tariffs and what their effects may be. There's a popular belief that trade rebounds, that once tariffs are lifted, everything returns to normal. And maybe that will happen, maybe not. The current administration seems convinced that this is the way forward, and who knows, maybe they know something that we don't, it's possible. There are some effects of these tariffs that are easy to calculate upfront, and then there are those secondary effects that nobody can really anticipate fully. Unfortunately, some of these changes are sticky. The supply chains move, the certifications change, the logistics adapt. And even if the US rolled back every single tariff tomorrow, the infrastructure would already be set elsewhere. This is why economists say that policy has inertia. It doesn't reverse, it reorients, and when enough pieces shift, the center of gravity moves as well. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you subscribe. Let's try to reach 20,000 by Christmas. So as for the question earlier, how much extra are American households paying each year due to tariff rollouts? The answer is between $1,600 and $2,000 US. It's not an abstract number. It's grocery bills, material costs, and energy markups, ripple effects from a trade policy designed to protect domestic industry, but which instead rebounded through the entire supply chain. And that's the real lesson here. Trade isn't just something that happens in ports and boardrooms. It happens in your actual wallet, in the price of plywood, in whether your energy comes through a pipe from Alberta or a ship from Rotterdam. If Canada can redirect its trade in less than 5 years with deals that outlast elections, what's stopping other nations from doing the same? Maybe the issue isn't size, but focus. Not power, but planning. If this idea interests you, I'm linking a playlist focusing on deeper analysis of how Canada, Sweden, and Denmark are reshaping energy partnerships with Europe and why green infrastructure is becoming its own kind of diplomacy. And as always, thank you for watching. In geopolitics, as in trade, the quietest moves tend to echo the longest.